Hello and welcome to you all our dear Energy Magazine subscribers and readers. My name is Katherine Krupka. I am the Executive Director of the Energy Medicine Professional Association and host for this Energy Magazine exclusive author interview. I am thrilled to my core to be joined today by Jonathan Hammond, a very special shamanic practitioner, teacher, author, and spiritual counselor. I took courses in shamanic healing practices with Jonathan over the course of 2 or 3 years, and literally my life was permanently changed from a journey we did in one of our classes. So you could say I'm a fan. And I also attended the same interfaith seminary. Jonathan is generally an excellent practitioner, a teacher, guide, and really just a wonderful human. So for a more formal introduction, Jonathan is a certified shamanic Reiki teacher and is a key advisor for shamanic Reiki worldwide. He teaches classes in shamanism, energy healing, spirituality, and Huna at many locations, including the prestigious Omega Institute, and is now teaching online as well. He has certifications in Huna, Cherokee bodywork, Ho'oponopono, and many others. He's also received Wicca initiation and completed intensive training in the therapeutic facilitation of psychedelics. He's worked and studied alongside shamans in Mexico, Brazil, Bali, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Bali, and Hawaii. Jonathan is now deeply focused on empowering and healing people by bringing indigenous earth wisdom to the modern world. And before he began his work in holistic health and spirituality, Jonathan was an award-winning actor on Broadway and on television. His first book, The Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life, has really helped put his work out in the world. He lives now on beautiful Maui and has a practice serving people around the globe. Jonathan, I am so happy to have you here today and so happy to be able to talk to you again.
Aloha, Katherine. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So we could do this all day. I'm super excited. Lots of questions. I think the first one is shamanism is a term that kind of gets thrown around in a lot of ways, contexts, and with a lot of sort of different meanings these days. So I'd love to hear from you with your background in a lot of different traditions. How would you define shamanism and what is a shaman?
Shamanism is a reverence of nature, that more than anything else. And we look at nature as a template to teach us about ourselves. And so as the Christians worship Christ and the Buddhists worship Buddha, shamanic practitioners essentially worship nature because nature teaches us about ourselves. So it's that. It's a deep connection with the earth. And the shaman is an indigenous healer that is the healer of relationships, the relationships we have between our mind and our body, between ourselves and others, between others and others, and between everyone and on the planet. And the ultimate goal of the shamanic practitioner is to facilitate wellness to such a degree that we pay forward our well-being, our abundance, our health to the collective. So it's all ultimately in service to the earth. But there's a lot of things that we each need to do individually to be well enough and fortified and full enough to actually fulfill that obligation that we have.
Would you consider yourself a shaman?
No, I mean, I don't. That's not a word that. First of all, it's a tough path. You know, it's a tough path. So it's not necessarily a word that I want to glom onto. I consider myself a shamanic practitioner. You know, I think that I do think that word gets thrown around a bit and can be a little casually conveyed. It's really meant for. That title is meant for indigenous people who went through a very specific training. That is connected to their culture. I would definitely consider myself a shamanic practitioner. I would consider myself a healer for sure. But I sort of leave that. People have called me that, but I sort of leave that to everyone else. I don't have a big ego around the label, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my understanding is there are shamanic practices, tradition, wisdom paths around the world, similar and different. I know you studied a lot of places and with a lot of people. So what are some of the differences you might see among them? And really going specifically to Huna, which I know is your focus these days, or really not just these days, but sort of your path. And where is Huna maybe different than some of the other traditions that people in the States might be more familiar with?
Well, actually, what I found was that differences were not really a thing. In all those different cultures in which I worked and studied and worked alongside shamans, they were all essentially doing the same thing. They were all working with energy. They were all working with love. They were all working with in conjunction with spirit. They all had a connection with nature. They all identified the unitive consciousness, the oneness, as is exemplified in nature, as their paradigm through which they went through life. So there were just so many similarities. What happened with Huna was two things: that I fell in love with Hawaii, which was just had no intention of finding anything spiritual here, other than it's the beauty of the nature. But Huna is a philosophical construct that when I began learning it, I could see that this is the universal mind that I was seeing in all the different cultures, and these ideas were what I saw all shamans practicing, and they were also helped me identify for myself in my own healing work why my healing was effective and what I was actually doing, and what and so it pointed toward the alchemy underneath the practices, underneath the different cultures, and what was actually going on underneath, and that there is a way to think about the work that helps us understand it and explain it to others. So Huna, but I'd never seen something that was so elegantly stated, a group of ideas and practices that said, if you adopt these and you bring them into your life and integrate them, this is how the shamans are thinking. And that was really revolutionary. When you think of shamanism, you don't think of dogma, you don't think of scripture, you don't think of anything like that. And shamanism is usually, particularly stateside shamanism, is really about the practices, about being invited into practices. But one of the things that I think is a little bit lacking in shamanic training is about the theory, why. What's underneath it? Why is it working? What are we doing when we go on a journey? What are we doing when we place our hands on someone and healing happens? Where does that energy come from? All of that, and that really came from the Polynesian tradition. So that it was, so Huna was just a kind of destination for me, because it combined everything that I had ever studied, from the psychology to energy healing to shamanic journeying to counseling, and it was a way in which I could think about all of them and connect them all into one kind of cosmology or paradigm.
Wow. So I'm hearing you say philosophy, that there's a teaching aspect to it. And I wonder, because your title of your book is The Shaman's Mind.
Yeah.
And so is this where you're going with that? Is the mind of the shaman? Tell me a little more if this is the connection, or what is it that's special about the mind of the shaman?
I was just reading some, because this is what I do on days off. I was just reading some Jung yesterday, and one of the things that I've seen in Jung's work a lot is this sense of almost like a pleading of psyche is real, psyche is real. Yeah. And what he's really getting at is that that our mind, our thoughts, our intentions, our expectations, our worldview, our habituated thoughts, our unconscious thoughts, are creating our individual world. So in the Hawaiian tradition, we think of the Hawaiians think of the daytime starting at nighttime, and that out of the nighttime, out of the inner world, comes the manifest reality of day. And so everything external to us is a dream that is symbolic of our inward dream. And this is the case for everyone. And so if you can be meticulous and disciplined about following, about curating what's going on in you, what are you feeding? What are you feeding? What are you aligning with in terms of your thinking? Your outward world cannot help but reflect that almost exactly. But we don't really, but we hear that, but we don't really believe that. We don't really, or we do, except for this thing or except for that thing. It's compartmentalized. When I think of the leading a spiritual life is really nothing more than the confrontation of our individual compartmentalization of living a spiritual life. When it comes up. Yeah. So it's really about aligning our minds with the world that we want to create. If you think of reality as a blank canvas onto which we project our inner world, then that means that we each have an individual part to play about what we are projecting onto that reality. And whatever we do project on that reality then influences the reality of the all. So there is great power and responsibility that we all have in our own inner world. So my Hawaiian teacher, he says, if you want to heal someone, think of them and you feel good.
Mm-hmm. And that energy of what we're feeling in relation to them and our own self is what gets out projected.
There's only one thing. There's only one thing. We are each individually an expression of that one thing and contributing to that one thing. And our health or ill health is also contributing or not contributing to the one thing. Just like nature.
Well, I'd love to actually touch more on nature and how, because it's interesting, there's the whole philosophical, if you will, aspect of it, right? And the thinking and how what we're thinking is what's creating, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the very seemingly different world of nature, the ground, the trees, the water. So how do those fit together?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you think of beings in nature, they are of themselves so. They are spontaneous and non-self-conscious expressions of themselves. So the daisy is just being a daisy, and the shark is just being a shark, and the tree is just expressing itself as tree, unencumbered, without social convention, without politeness, just a natural expression of itself. And we are beings of nature. We do not live on Earth. We are Earth. And so the idea that we can find our way ourselves back, heal our ways back to that spontaneous expression before we were socialized, before we learned the rules of the culture, before we learned the rules of parents, before we learned the rules of what we see on television and the polarities there, and there's something there that is so natural and so spontaneous, and we are wired for it. And so the idea of being grounded is about being grounded into our feeling sense. We all have that feeling of this feels right or this doesn't feel right, but we don't listen to it. But if we actually did that, those deeper feelings within us are the earth's wisdom, in conjunction with our soul, telling us this is what you focus on, this is what you don't focus on, this is what you put your attention on, this is what you don't put your attention on. And the more that you do that, the more that you are bringing into being those things. And now we're back to mind. But the groundedness is how you know what to focus on, what to think about. And with the sense that our soul's journey is wired in our biology, but we have to get down into our bodies enough to feel it. And the culture is determined to pull us out of our bodies into ideas of ourselves, into shoulds, into someone else's rules. You turn on television, it tells you how you're supposed to look, what money is, what women are, what people are, and what politics are, all of that. And there's something underneath that. If you can turn down the volume on that, there is an individual wisdom that we all possess that holds literally everything we need to figure out the reality that we individually want to create. So it's about getting in ourselves. A lot of times people say, "What do you do for a living?" And I say, I get people in their bodies and tell them to feel their feelings. And if you can do that, if you can do that, that is the start of finding yourself, your original nature. That same nature that just spontaneously expresses itself that you see outside.
That's amazing. So the nature that we think of as, the external, the trees and plants and flowers and all of that, and our own nature, which is really one and the same, and coming into it, then what I'm hearing brings us, it lets us hear, it lets us know what actually is true nature, and then to be able to create from that, or create.
And not only that, but at a time on the planet where truth is absolutely subjective, which is actually one of the principles of Huna, which says that what's true is what works, what's true is what's real. So it's very interesting that truth has been given this this sort of tenuous idea now. And I do think, even though there's a negative connotation to that, there's something about that is in service to, well, I don't know what to believe, so I have to go inward. And I would even go so far as to say that at least some of the evolutionary aspect of the pandemic was about it's time to go inward, because you won't find truth outside of yourself. And I think a lot of people, certainly in this country, but on the planet, are really going through that process of pulling away from the truth that we're spoon-fed to something that's more individual and right and real and natural and authentic for us.
That then changes, again, what we experience or what we see out there, which is interesting, because one of my questions was going to be that the whole shamanic thing has become such a popular idea in, I don't know, the past 30, 40 years, but even more so now, really. And I was going to ask whether you see a connection with that and, the times that we're going through. It feels like perhaps shamanism is the approach for these times.
Esoteric wisdom, the idea that you can go to a bookstore and go to the spirituality section and just have all of that available to you, that is specific to and designed by, spiritually designed, because this is a time on the planet where the masses need it. And so I do think all of this, it's only been the last 50 years, 50, 60 years that it's really out there. And I think that that's really by design. And I think it's because what's going on on the planet is a huge evolution and devolution. That both of those things are happening right now. There are systems that are absolutely dying, and the people at the top are fighting like hell to hold on to it. And then there is this other thing developing, and this other thing needs teachers and wisdom, and any of the wisdom traditions ultimately their conclusion is always about, it's kind of smart to love. And when you think of nature, when you think of the earth, nature just wants to keep going. It just wants to experience itself further. That's what you see when you see a forest. And what would be the intention underneath something that just wants to keep going? Love. So to align with love is to align with the evolutionary spiritual principle of nature itself. And what's gotten us in the mess is separation. And love, aloha, which means to face or to share with, breath, to share breath, life force with someone, to share joy, alo, to share oha, joy, to share joy, breath with someone. Love congeals, brings things together. And what's wrong right now on the planet is separation, the illusion of separation. And so that's why I think shamanism in particular is making a resurgence, because again, nature exemplifies that interconnectivity, that intercooperation, that sense that we really are all in it together. There's only one thing. And so that's why I think shamanism is kind of making a resurgence. I think it's needed right now.
It's interesting also because our modern societies have become, separate, fractured, individualistic.
Yeah.
And even the things, even so many of the spiritual practices that I see out there today, or the healing practices that are there, even those are sort of individually focused. They're still about me.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself seems a little limiting, in that maybe I know it's true in each tradition, but sort of that next step, which to me seems just a little more right out there in the shamanic path, is it's not just me, it is me as all of this. It is me and our community or in the world. Is that?
Yeah. You kind of have to kind of back pocket it while you're doing the individual work. But what happens, the inevitable conclusion that comes from healing, and healing's a thing. Healing is real. Healing actually happens, And but when that happens, there is an organic response, and I've seen it over and over and over again, to pay it forward. That once you learn how to remove the tack from your foot, there is this sense of, I learned something. I have such relief that I want to help everyone else remove the tack from their foot. That's why the wounded healer is the best healer. That's what Jung was getting at, because what it's really saying is that once I've dealt with my wounds enough, I can feel what it's like to have them not be online, and I want to pay it forward. So that's always in the back of my mind when I'm working with someone individually, that this journey, that bringing you toward a little bit more of your wholeness, a little bit more of your wellness, a little bit more of your nature, will ultimately cause you to bring that forward in someone else. That's just the way it works. So that's always there. You heal yourself, you heal the collective.
So coming back to Huna and
Yeah.
some specifics of the Hawaiian tradition with this, what are a couple other things that feel sort of specific about it, or that were particularly resonant for you?
I loved the idea in the this isn't so much Huna, but it's the Hawaiian tradition, that the Hawaiian kahunas, the Hawaiian shamans, they come from a tradition of questions, which means that the shaman will offer nothing. The shaman will only answer questions, and the shaman will only ask the exact questions being asked, which seems withholding, but it actually puts the responsibility for what the question is on the student, on the person who is seeking healing. And so there's something about that is, because certainly with holistic practitioners, one of the things that we deal with so much is the resistance of the client. Healing and resistance are two sides of the same coin. They go hand in hand. You don't have one without the other. And the idea that this particular tradition says you're taking responsibility for even asking, and I really love that aspect of it, for sure. I also, I guess the other thing that really comes up is around the idea that we think of everything as a dream. When you think of a dream, a nighttime dream, the easiest way to think of dream interpretation is that everything that's happening in the dream is a reflection of something about you, right? So the waking dream, so you're one of my dream characters in my waking dream, is also a reflection of something about you. And when you start to see that, when you start to see your life as everything being a reflection of something about you, not in a narcissistic way, in a responsibility taking way, because the good things that are coming up are curated by your inner world, and the not so good things that are coming up are curated by your inner world. And so that's a really potent shamanic idea, that what you are seeing is you.
So one of the things that you talk about is how practical the shamanic path is, so that if a shaman realizes that something's really good, they can make it better. If it's not to their liking, they can change it, which feels so sort of the next step of the realization you just described. When I realized all of this is a project, is an expression of what's in here, then it seems like the space to influence it or to change it is more accessible. What's that? Is that it? Am I drawing that step there correctly? Or what's that next step where a shaman then steps in and does something or creates something?
I think it's about the truth will set you free stuff. Because I think, you know, when you get down to this is what's true, without being polite, without being socialized, without what you think, without how I'm going to disappoint you or how I'm going to, when you just get to what is true for me, it is like this cosmic, you know, even sometimes I'll say to a client, I'll say, you know, you're a little weird. And I can see them bathed with relief because essentially they've been trying to be someone else's idea of what they are, and just letting them know maybe you have your own rules here, maybe you have your own way of doing things, maybe, you know, and that really opens something up. So I think the practicality of shamanism just comes from a sense of when I tell the truth, when I tell what's true for me, without all the trappings of the sociological considerations, I find myself. And so I think it's that. Even if you think of wise men and wise women, what are they really? They're people that just have been around enough that they can call a spade a spade.
Yes.
You know, and I think that is sort of the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is just to a point where I know what's true for me, and that's unshakable. And so I think it's about that. It's about coming home to yourself and pulling away from the way in which we were taught to pull away from ourselves.
And instead really going deeper and deeper to what I might call sort of that truer truth, because there's the what's true at this level of where I'm still engaged in all of this and want to look like this or want to be seen like that. There's that sort of truth, and then there's the much deeper nature truth that you're talking about.
Yeah, and we have to live in that world. We have to live in that world. When you've heard the phrase of, you know, our foot in both worlds. You know, what they're getting at is that there is the left brain, you know, rational, factual, all those things, schedules, gets us to our things on time, all of that. And then there's the right brain, which is imaginative and intuitive and empathic and believes in the collective and can feel unity. You know, and those two things, you know, even the shamans, they there was a sense that they absolutely identified as an individual person. That was there, but what was also there was a sense that it's all for the group or the tribe or the community. That both of those things, and if we could just move a little bit more toward that balance, you know, I often talk about the time on the planet. If everyone just did their part, just do your part. Just clean up your mess enough that it's not spilling over into my experience. Just do that. Just do that. And that's all that's needed in terms of the contribution. You know, so that's sort of how I tend to think about it. It's not that we're rejecting the world. It's that we are excavating our own truth and finding out how we can align with the world that is presented to us in a way that is beneficial both to ourselves and the established world. Does that make sense?
It does, and it seems that then ultimately, of course, changes that world as well, as we're all cleaning up, right. all whatever that really means, as we're all cleaning that up, then the world itself changes, which maybe is what we're seeing in part. What do you think?
I do. You know, think of the when I talk about the culture, I'm talking about the binary: good, bad, black, white, Trump, Biden, vax, unvax, all of that stuff. You know, and which epitomizes separation. And the shaman or the healer or the mystic sits in the middle of those things, holding the consciousness of the all. And so to not align with, but to stay in the middle is to help, help everyone be understood. And help everyone, because whatever side you don't agree with, they're just as terrified as you are. They just have a different way of expressing it, and they just have a different history and a different psychology. And so to sit in the middle as a holder of consciousness, that is the goal of the healer in the age of the healer, at a time when we need anyone who's supposed to get online to be a healer. Now's the time, because all these changes are happening, they're inevitable, and with change, people need someone to help them negotiate these things that happen. So and that's why my first love is to teach healers, because they're so needed right now. And you know, a lot of times healers think of themselves as in service and even a little martyr, you know, and I think of them as, no, wait a minute, you're important. You have to think of yourself important. You're actually have a part of your mind focused on the collective. That's not everyone. Own that about yourself. You're important, you know.
You know, that's a really that's a very interesting sort of reframe, right? From what feels like maybe an older idea of to minimize the self in service to the whole. And what I'm hearing you say is the wisdom from which you come and with which you work is one of being that point of balance, of sitting in that, and there is no minimizing of anything. It's that it is the wholeness.
Yeah, you're not going to convince those people of anything. The only thing, but what you can do is live your life out loud, abundantly, with love, with your eye on the collective enough that they go, I wonder what she's having, because it looks good over there. And to be someone who's creating a life to emulate is part of the work. So it really is about the people that you think you can't reach. You reach your individual investment in yourself, hopefully.
There's an understanding, if I'm understanding it correctly, that in the shamanic world, there isn't so much, you know, oh, one should eschew the physical or, you know, the expressions, or I should, you know, live a life of poverty or whatever like that. It really, I get a different feeling from that. So tell us a little bit about how a shamanic view of living in the world.
Well, if you look at nature, it is incredibly abundant. If you go even past the earth, we're talking about a universe that is infinite. And one of the principles in the Huna tradition is about the reality of limitlessness. And that means that there's no reason to go without, and that everyone gets to and deserves to have what they need, not more than they need, but what they need. You know, what's exemplified in nature is, you know, when the lion eats the deer, then the lion drinks at the same river as the brother of the deer that he just ate, because he's had enough. You know, that's what's epitomized in nature. It's about the allowing yourself abundance, not in a spiritually materialistic way, but in a way that says, I'm so full, I want to help. I'm so full, I can't help but. You know, and if I'm going to do this long term, I'm so full that I've got it to give. I've got the extra energy, I've got the extra juice. If you think about the spiritual teachers that we love, the contemporary ones, they all live in a mansion on a hill. You know, and that is really, you know, but they are, but they have a responsibility that they are playing in exemplifying that. You know, so it's a different way to think of, it's a different way to think about spiritual leadership, but it is about that we're supposed to love, but we're supposed to, if we think of treating ourselves as God, another Hawaiian idea, you know, God doesn't deny itself anything. Nature doesn't deny itself anything. You know, the trees go after the sun, they go after the water, they go after what it is that they need to sustain themselves and evolve and keep going. And we are more like that. And to do that abundantly is to do it in the same way that nature does.
That feels so and organic is the word coming up. It feels so natural and so obvious, and almost like some of the other ideas we had created and been working with are part of that sort of societal teaching, part of old ideas that really don't fit where we are any longer.
Yeah, if you know, there's a lot of talk about gratitude. I love the idea of talking about gratitude when you're grateful, not when you've been withheld from, not when you withheld from yourself, not when you followed someone else's rules that are never going to get you where you want to go. What do you have to be grateful for? You know, it's about undoing that enough, finding yourself, filling yourself up with you, and then going, thank God, thank you.
That's so beautiful. So this actually makes me think, and maybe I'm leaping a strange way, but it actually makes me think. You write about Ho'oponopono and have talked about that as well. So this unity, the gratefulness, all these pieces are sort of coming up to me, making me think of Ho'oponopono. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how that fits in all of this?
Well, it's really, if
and
the
probably
ultimate
even what it is, because some people may know.
Sure. So if the ultimate goal is the naturalness, then Ho'oponopono, that practice, and it's more than a practice, it's a map of healing. That practice gets us there, because it essentially says, and this is a very simplistic way to think of it, that we have a conscious mind that is defined by choice, that can choose to send love to the body mind that holds the parts of us that were born of unlove. And just by making the choice to send love to ourselves, and in the actual practice, it's 3 or 4 phrases, but by sending love to the parts of ourselves that are hurt, the low self-esteem, the pain, the I don't look right, the I'll never be, the all of that, you know, that just by doing that, the spiritual intelligences wake up to the idea that love is being created down here through our choice. And they go, I want to help with that. And they bring us the healing. And so the Ho'oponopono epitomizes a shamanic paradigm, which is a down to go up. So if you think of New Age or contemporary spirituality, it's about up, you know. And this is about that because our inner world is the outer dream. If our inner world is filled with love, the outer dream reflects back the love. So by filling ourselves with the intentionality to heal, to love, that's all the spirits that hang around the planet, that's all they want to do. They're ecstatic to help. They're just waiting. But we have to curate the circumstances down here that they can do their thing. And as soon as we start doing that, they go, I got a live one down there. And let me bring them the influence. Let me bring them the healing. Let me bring them what the Hawaiians called the mana loa, you know, the big energy, the big power. And we do that through just making the choice toward love, and making the choice away from separation, hatred, fear, all of those things. So Ho'oponopono is a map that sets all that up. Yeah.
And I'm also intrigued by the going down to go up, or the going in to go out. Tell me a little more about that, because the distinction that you're drawing is bringing an idea to me about a lot of people in the energy, or a lot of, I don't want to be careful how I say this, is some of us, in the energy healing world, some of the energy healing methods that we tend to be drawn to these days that sort of are just up. And maybe don't do so much of the down. But I'm hearing that down is really an important piece of this activation.
Yeah, that's where you plant yourself into the earth. That's where you plant yourself into the earth, by going down. And to claim your own belongingness on this earth by rooting yourself down into that's it. That's the goal. When you think of contemporary spirituality, yes, it's upper chakras. When you think of, you go to a spiritual class, you love the love, you love the expression, you love the imagination and the wisdom, and you love the connection to spirit. But what's left out is the self-esteem and the healthy sense of self. And this is a big one beneath it, the feeling our feelings as real, even the ones that in a spiritual room we're not supposed to have and we're not supposed to like. And when you think of, again, to look at nature, there are things in nature we don't like. We don't like the tarantulas and the great white sharks and the tsunamis, but we don't think they're not supposed to be there.
Good point.
But what we do to us is we take that, we relegate all of those feelings to the shadow, and those are the things that are actually directional for us. When you think of something as unattractive as anger is saying something's wrong here. There's a boundary that's being crossed. Even something like jealousy, saying I want what that person has. That's directive. And so the ownership of our feelings is so important. And we think in so much contemporary spirituality, it's about pulling away from them or even transcending them. And shamanism is not about transcending anything. It's about facing it clearly, integrating it, allowing it to be there as the evolutionary life force that it is, and working with it skillfully. So that's why it's about going down. And it's also about, we live on this earth. Yeah. And the idea that that there are some contemporary that traditional religion would say, like, wait till when it's all over, that's when it gets good, when it gets good, and that's not that's a way to enslave you into an idea that this life isn't for you. And there are a whole bunch of financial reasons for that as well.
Well, it's interesting because there's definitely that. And even like, my studies were mostly a Vedic path, which was a path of transcendence.
Yeah.
Even that's a little bit of, this life isn't so great. Let's exist out here. And so even there's a little bit of not being with what is here. And, back to Jung, if we're not with what is here, it's going to run us just the same, right?
That's right. That's right.
So better to work with it. One of the things that seems so, I'm going to bring together two ideas and hopefully do it somewhat skillfully. So this idea of grounding, right, and being in the body, being in the middle and lower chakras, being with the feelings, with what is, the pretty, the not so pretty, all of it, is also being with nature, right? All of those things, right, are expressions of nature and are parts of nature. And they also are a piece of healing. That without that whole, can something be whole? Can something be fully healed if it isn't whole? Does that make any sense? Like if I'm just looking at this piece of it, I can make this piece look all nice, but this other piece here might not even get any help. And that really may be what needs the attention. The last piece of this is the shamanic path really seems to not hold a lot of judgment. This is a good feeling or a bad feeling. This is a good thing or a bad feeling. I'm hearing much more. It's like what works, what needs to happen. So I just ran through like 3 different topics there, but
I hear you. So first of all, judgment is useless. It is a useless emotion. It does nothing. And in fact, criticism and judgment, as I write about in my book, are the very things that block love, because criticism and judgment separate. and love brings things together. So when you are criticizing and judging your feelings, you are separating yourself from your truth. And you are separating yourself from again, an evolutionary life force. It doesn't mean that you become a rageaholic. It doesn't mean that you act out on the anger, but the identification of it is really important because it's saying something. When I'm working with clients, one of the very first things I'll say in the first or second session is what are you angry about? And most of the time, because they're spiritual people, most of the time they go, anger? I don't really, but yeah, I'm done with that. But when you can actually allow yourself a rapport with that, that is telling you something that is true for you. And we, as children, we are innocent to someone else's paradigm of life and history and teaching us and showing us and turning us into their version. And if we've really drank that Kool-Aid, we do have something to be angry about because we've been pulled away from ourselves, and we weren't asked, well, what do you think? What do you think? I know what I think, but what do you think? And that's the idea of that being that parent that guides and loves and all of that, but also says that also says, I don't have an expectation for you other than the one that comes out of you. That's the one that's real, and that's the one that I'm interested in. And I'll guide you around that, but I want to know that first. And if we didn't get that, which most of us don't, and it's not in the culture to give us that,
right,
we probably have something to be angry about in terms of coming back to ourselves, coming back to our nature. And it's important to the anger even models something to that inner voice that says I shouldn't be doing that.
So it's interesting because I really am hearing you in the whole field, right? Talking about the individual, talking about your work with other individuals, with groups, the culture, the society, the trees and the lions and everything together. And I love engaging in such a large space. I have a couple more questions I want to ask, and they're totally unrelated to one another.
Good.
So I'm like, hey, we're just going to jump all over the place here. But I do wanted to ask you, you mentioned kind of on the societal fear for a moment, because it's it's a real thing we're all living in. And I think, again, as people who are, spiritual or healers, it can be tempting, I'll use that word, to sort of say, oh, I'm not involved there. That's not my world. I don't watch the news. I don't, whatever. And I have this tendency, it's like, so, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody except myself. And it is the world in which we live, right? So I would love to ask, in this bigger picture and what I suspect is an evolutionary process we're going through as a planet and as a people, you mentioned in your book the term wetiko, which is a very intense, potent, but also it seems in some ways maybe a trigger to transformation in some way. So I'd love if you would mind sharing the idea of that and how you see that in our world.
Yeah, so Wetiko is it's a Native American concept, and it's a virus of the mind, and it is a self-cannibalizing demon in the mind, and it operates through fear, through separation, through dominion over nature, the human's dominion over nature, through all the qualities that we look out in the world and we go, why are people like that? That is this virus of the mind. There's the Gnostics called it the demiurge, the false god of the binary, the false god of the convention, what everyone's subscribing to, and so it's meant to another way to say it from a Jungian perspective, it's about our shadow being our unclaimed, unowned shadow including our anger, just to talk about what we were talking about earlier, being projected out onto others. You know, this thing inside of us that we won't acknowledge, that really is about I don't care about you. I don't believe we are connected. This separation is the true nature of reality. Eye for an eye justice is a good thing. You know, that's very much in the culture, and the Native Americans consider that a kind of demon of the mind. And so that's really, and we just see it, that's what's happening on the planet. Everything is about the binary, everything. And even just to say this too, even that the emergence of the non-binary right now is not about a bunch of people who just have this egotistical idea about some sexuality thing. It is about, I have come here and I don't fit. And because I don't fit, I am offering a new way of being and a new human that you have to adapt to, because we've been adapting to you, and you're the reason why we're in this mess. And so that and whether or not you identify that in terms of sexuality or not doesn't matter, but the idea of I'm in the middle, that's the shaman. Even if you think about the nature of the divine, it's not male female, it's non-binary, you know. And so it's that wholeness that is the antithesis, or the thing that will combat Wetiko. Wetiko is only Paul Levy wrote a great book about it. He basically says that what kills it is just the awareness of that it's there.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that's why the idea of personal responsibility, because what I do affects the all, because I'm not separate from the all, is to begin to remove that in yourself. And then, because the outward dream reflects the inward dream, the outward dream also starts to remove it from itself.
An interesting question here would be for our viewers, readers, listeners who are largely practitioners or in the realms in one way or another. How might I mean, of course, we all have this virus to some extent. We're in society, it's there. What might be the ways that we begin to recognize where that lives in us, or the first steps of awareness that might allow us to change it? What is your experience or your wisdom that you might share with people on that?
I'm gonna go a little extreme just to make a point. You know, there's a Hawaiian phrase, I won't give you the Hawaiian, but the translation is to love oneself as one loves God. And so it takes self-love to a whole new thing. It actually says, as we would worship the divine, as we would revere the divine, we do that to us. And to the extent that you don't do that, is your work to do. And that's what's ultimately in the way. It does, again, I'm not going narcissistic, I'm not going egotistical, I'm going the appropriate response to the idea that I am a spark of the divine, that we are all individual sparks of the divine. And if that is true, that means that we should treat ourselves and create and curate a psychology that acknowledges that the divine is to be worshipped, that the divine is to be revered, that the divine is precious, that the divine is holy. And so if that's true, I'm going to go put myself in that dangerous situation. I'm going to go hook up with someone who abuses me. I'm going to go put that in my mouth. I'm whatever, but it makes things very clear in terms of where we show up and what our choices are, if we would own that for ourselves. And again, by owning it for yourself, you are sending out a message that says you could do that too. Then we have a whole bunch of gods running around, which seems a lot better than what we have now.
People who think they're gods in another whole level of that. I mean, that is an interesting, and this may sound like a very basic a banal question after what you've just shared, and so I apologize if that's the case, but I've seen places where there ends up being confusion between I am a spark of the divine, as are you, as is he and she and all of us, and the more ego-driven, I'm so special.
Yeah.
How does one navigate that? Or what are where's that?
Tricky.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it can be tricky. I mean, first of all, there's just the this sort of psychosis of maybe I'm Jesus. There's that. But I think more than anything else, it's you can find it through is gratitude present, is a sense of sharing present, is a sense of the idea that courage and humility are the same thing. And so, the idea that it is a humble thing, that the only way in which to move forward, despite the fear, is through the humility of the acknowledgement of the fear and then doing it anyway. That's courage. And so, it's you can feel the quality of it. The quality is about, it feels evolutionary. It feels fodder for growth. And the other one feels separate, and it feels in some way that I'm trying to have some sort of power over.
Yeah.
And power over is not power over will only lead to retaliation and fear, and power against will only cause tension. But the power to empower, that's how you have the power, because you can give it away.
That's beautiful. That's perfect. And that power over, anytime where that sense comes up, if I'm more wonderful, I'm more right, anything where that sense of separation comes in, where it's not the whole, right, that can be a signal for folks.
I often tell clients, I go surpass me, please. Go, I have no vested interest in being, maybe, I'm a step ahead, but there's no reason why, and I think like the kind of contemporary spiritual teachers that bank on this pedestalized idea of themselves, that you are to be my acolyte because you'll never become what I am,
right.
and that's not it. If I have attained anything, it's only through a lot of hard work, and I just want to teach you how to do it too. That's it. And I want you to do your version of it, and I'm not interested. And we weren't going to talk about this, but just say this out loud. In terms of in terms of the cultural appropriation of shamanism, the way in which I address it is just A, that we don't have time for that conversation, and B, it's about that there's only one mind, and that we are trying if we learn anything from indigenous wisdom, the whole purpose is to pay it forward. And I've never worked with any of the shamans in all the places that I've worked that ever said to me, Jonathan, I'm going to teach you this, but I need you to acknowledge me, and I need a check, and I need my residual check. I've never seen that. It's about it's about sharing. So I think that'll help help people understand that it's not a solipsistic, egotistical thing. It's not coming from that place. It's coming from a place of I want to be full, because the more full I am, the more I can give.
Those are amazing distinctions, and I really do feel, as you do, that this is the time. It just feels as a planet, as a species, all of it, that this needs to be coming out now. I would be curious, I'd love to sort of go into a little more about the experience of some of these shamanic practices, right? A lot of people have had some kind of experience. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what is it that goes on. And I might ask first, for people who maybe just are bringing this more whole, full chakra, all body of the earth part into their thinking or into their work, what might be a starting point for embodying that more, or a practice someone might do to get more accustomed to that full body?
You know, it's hard for me to say something universal about that, because I'm so used to dealing with individuals, and there's so many ways in, you know. But you know, I'll say this. It's, you know, it's an exercise I do in my book, and I think it's a really helpful one. And I think on some level we've heard this exercise, but I don't think we've actually done it. And it's really about, write down, what are the negative core beliefs? What are they? What is your I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm stupid? What are they? You know what they are, because you're saying them all the time, you know. And then, now that I know what they are, let me rewrite them as if they were in their opposite and positive aspect. And even though I might not be able to believe the new ones, those are something that I can work toward, you know. And that puts you squarely in the battle between you and you know. And the battle of because those negative core beliefs, those are as automatic as green light means go. They are in there. They are ingrained. They are connected to literally our fascia tissue, you know. And so, to begin the process of addressing them and identifying them, and moment by moment saying, you know what, I'm going to do this one now. I can't even believe it, and I'm going to fake it till I make it. But I'm going to go with this belief now, and I'm going to let that one go. And over time, when the new one takes hold, you know, that's it. But that battle between that we all internally have, that's what healing is. And to stay in that tension between the new way hasn't come into being, the old way hasn't fallen away. Stay in that. And if you do that, you're staying in your body, you're staying in your experience. If you think of what a spiritual life is, creative engagement with what's happening. That's what that is. And that's what that is. You know, so in this moment, my self-esteem about my looks is keeping me from going to this party, and I feel it, and I'm acknowledging it, and that's what's true. And I don't want to go to the party, but I know it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to stay in this because there's no growth in my not going to the party. You know, and maybe I fail, maybe I don't go, but I'm going to go back and be in that again, until this new one comes to hold where it's my party.
Right. I like that. I'm going to ask another question. This is a little bit, it's going to come out of a personal experience, but it's a universal question. Sure. When I was in one of your programs, we did a journey, and we were, I don't know, finding a teacher, getting wisdom, doing something. I don't even remember the details. I do remember that I was someplace, and I encountered this very wizened, old, strong Russian woman who was speaking to me. I have a long history in that country, who was speaking to me in a language that was not Russian, because I would have understood that. So all this other thing, and I don't know what the intention was going in. I really don't remember that part, but I can picture her as clearly as I can see you on the screen right now. And she came up, and she was saying all these things, and she had this big, old, you know, hardworking hand, and she just reached right in my body. And either she took something out, I kind of don't remember that part. She either took something out, or she just, you know, her hand came out. She said a few more things, and we were basically done. There was a physical experience that I had with that, right? It was something occurred in the body. And then I just said, well, that was interesting. What's the next assignment, right? Or whatever we did. But what I realized as the day went on, and I walked around New York City that night and came back to class the next day, is that the voice that had been persistent, that always basically was saying some version of, Katherine, you suck. right?
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of creative ways to go about it, but always the same. It wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't speaking. And it took, hours to recognize its absence, right? It's easier to notice when something is there than when it isn't. But as I walked around and I, went here, did this, it wasn't there. So yay, right? It basically has never come back. And if it does try to show up, it's almost like a caricature of a voice and just not compelling.
Mm-hmm.
So when something occurs in a journey, what goes on?
Well, the shamanic journey is about, so there's this reality, the ordinary reality, the contemporary shamans call it ordinary reality. And then there is a non-ordinary reality, which is a reality sort of peripheral to, or aside from, or hidden from the consensus reality. And so to enter into, and in that reality, that's where the spirits live. That's where we access and override our conscious mind and tune in with a different kind of wisdom, a different kind of seeing, a different kind of different ways of being. It's very, very, very connected to the imagination, which gets a bad rap because that is the tool. That is the tool of the shaman, the imagination. When you come to me in session, I'm imagining you well. That's my job. And because I'm good at it, I tend to imagine something better than you would ever come up with. And so it's good to go along with it. But that's really important. So the imagination is what enters you into that altered state of consciousness enough that you enter into an inner world. You can think of it as an inner world. A shaman would say you're going to a place. It's a real place, but a psychological space, a place in the psyche or a place in the heart where compassionate, helping spirits are there to help you and are there to bring you wisdom and are there to bring you healing. And even when you're not journeying, when your clients are placing their hands on someone, like that, there are energetic considerations happening and presences, beings, whether or not you personify them or not, that are bringing that thing into being. And so I think you were just at a point where you just needed something to just shake something, to move something, and you were able to do it. It's an amazing story that you're telling, that happened to you. But it is about, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, tell me your problem. Great, let's go into a journey, go find a guide and go work on the problem. And and even if you think that the spirits, they are ecstatic to help. That's why they hang around the planet. That's why they're even around. And so the idea that prayer is instantly heard, maybe not on your timeline, but that it's instantly heard. And the idea that you had an intentionality to go, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at this in a formal way in conjunction with spirit. And spirit showed up. And so that's a big part of what a shamanic journey is. It's about entering into an imagined dream, a curated inner dream, where everything's on our team, and wants to bring us toward our wholeness. Does that help?
It helps tremendously. And so what I'm hearing is part of what goes on is we are getting out of the way.
We're getting out of the way.
Leaving ordinary consciousness where this can't happen, this can happen, this takes time, this doesn't take time. All the rules, quote unquote, of ordinary reality, of ordinary consciousness. And those are set aside. We're in a state, we're in a realm, we're in worlds where those rules no longer apply, and many other things can occur. The spirits can show up in any number of ways.
Once you see a new truth about yourself, you can miss the mark in terms of forgetting it in the moment, or even conveniently forgetting it in the moment because you can get out of something, but you can't ever forget it. You can't ever forget it. and that's the paradigm shift that comes through healing. When any modicum of healing happens, what opens up is more limitlessness, less rules, new ways of being, new possibilities that weren't there because of the tension of what things were before the healing. The Hawaiians believe that all illness, physical, mental, spiritual, or otherwise, is born of tension. And so the idea, well, yeah, so just the idea, even if you think of the default network in the brain, default network in the brain, that's this part of the brain that is constantly replaying a continuity of self that we understand. And so, and it's tight. It's tight because it knows what it knows, and it's scanning the future and scanning the past to keep being exactly. That's why a healing is met with resistance. Even stuff that's good for us is met with resistance because this part of us does not want to change, and so psychedelics, for instance, actually destabilize that part of the brain enough that we're suggestible for new things, and shamanic healing does the same thing, that you're bringing yourself to, this is where I'm stuck, this is where I must continue to believe what I believe about myself and about life, but it's not getting me where I want to go, and I can't, and it's, and you just relax it, open it up, and then you're on to the next thing. And that can happen in a shamanic journey. It can happen a lot of different ways. It can happen in therapy. There are a lot of different ways, but it's that release. And then with that is a whole new set of circumstances, realities, possibilities, rules, all of it. People,
Our world changes, right?
Right.
We're changing.
That's
Our
right.
world changes.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, that's extraordinary. This is such exciting work that you're doing, and really, especially even though Hawaiian teachings feel maybe almost more I don't want to say accessible in the sense of easy, but a little closer to a quote Western mindset than maybe some of the other.
Well, I was real,
There's a mind element to it.
That's right. That's right. When I was always a psychology nerd, and transpersonal psychology was a big part of my own healing, in addition to all the spiritual stuff. So I've always been very psychologically minded. And I remember reading a not very good book on Huna before I knew anything about it. And there were 3 paragraphs in it where it was describing the 3 selves: the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the superconscious mind, or the higher self. And these 3 paragraphs encapsulated everything that I thought or understood about healing from every aspect. And it was something that went, what is this? And a lot of the Hawaiian spiritual tradition does have a kind of psychological element, which I think, and if you add a psychological element to an indigenous element, there's something there that's very integrative with now, and I do think we need both. I do absolutely think we need both. But the idea that those two paradigms sort of congeal in the Polynesian tradition was something that was interesting to me. But in terms of the class and what I teach, it's not about anything Hawaiian. It's about taking this universal wisdom and paradigms and ways of thinking about healing. If anyone were to take my class and we were to go through the 7 principles of Huna, you go, I know these. I know I didn't know that I know these, but I know these. But it's just a way to connect it with our own understanding and our own psychology now, and that's why I love it.
Amazing. I'm just loving this whole conversation. I love everything about this. I love the power and the potency of things that really are bringing us back together in a very complete way at all the layers, if you will, right? The sort of individual layer, the fractured psyche level. I mean, all these levels, all these layers, right? It really is it's an approach of wholeness. It's a teaching of wholeness. They're practices of wholeness. Really, that is the core and the whole of all of it, if I understand it correctly. And
Yeah.
it feels you articulate it so well in your book and in your classes and through the practices that you do with people. And so I really appreciate you being with us here today and sharing with our readers and sharing with everybody all the wisdom that you have. I would, well, certainly not all the wisdom that you have much more, but sharing all that you have with us today. What I would love to ask, is there anything you'd love to leave our readers with? Anything you'd like to share as an end point?
That it's just about, this isn't the end times, although a lot of things are ending, and if you are scared, or you are depressed, the more that you can recognize that you are actually living in an extraordinary time, and a time where all of these beneficial changes are happening, where a collective shadow is being shined a light on, and that is healing. You bring what is hidden to the light, shine a light on it, and integrate it. That is Jung's process of individuation happening globally, and that is happening now. And so, if you can know that whatever it is that you are individually dealing with during this time, it is part of that. And to be very kind to yourself about, is what I'm doing right now, is where I'm living right now, is this thought form, is it evolutionary? Is it in alignment with the big evolution that's happening on the planet? And that inquiry is such an important one for everyone at this time, and that will keep you safe.
And that's the perfect place to end. And I think a perfect invitation, really, for all of us, as we do look at our lives, as we look at where we're comfortable and uncomfortable, where we are in the world around us, where we are in relation to everything that we are experiencing. I also really love what you're saying about the love and the gentleness and the gratitude that brings the healing to all of it. Jonathan, I want to thank you so very much. It's such a treat. And I'm thrilled. And I hope that all of our Energy Magazine readers are enjoying this also. You will find Jonathan's website and a link to his book in our notes. Thank you all for joining us and for your support. And may we all be well. Thank you.
Aloha. Thank you.